All right. Well, welcome to the inaugural podcast of Understanding the Science of You. And it's only fitting, and it wasn't planned, that Jennifer Sunshine Romanowski is joining me. By the way, for the sake of this podcast, how do you want to be
Call
Jen,
me
Jennifer,
Sunshine.
Sunshine? You want to be all right?
Sunshine. Yes, absolutely.
All right, groovy. All right. So either way, I got both of them out there for those that know you by Jen, those that know you by Sunshine. You know, we've drawn that connection here. So somebody who's been with me throughout my, crazy walkabout here over the last 6 years, plus my, prior life, it's only fitting that you, as I start this next chapter of life, help kick it off with me as well. And so, as I take on, a new identity, a new set of labels, whatever you want to call it, I thought that, the way that would be a great introduction in understanding the science of you is starting by understanding different labels, right? And and the purpose in these conversations is just about helping people to feel comfortable, in their own skin. So essentially that's our conversation today, is to be our I should say, our driving intention behind the conversation today is to be open and vulnerable and real and talk about the ugly, right? Because that's what people can relate to learn from. And so we just want to have a safe space to talk about the real stuff and how we, in the journey of becoming comfortable in our own skin. So, that being said, let's see what we can do about, helping to make some people, feel a little happier about themselves. Sound good to you?
I love it. I love it, and I'm really excited. I think this will be a really good topic, really to start and to kick everything off, because hopefully we'll talk about some labels today that will resonate with folks. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's definitely, I would be lying if I didn't say that I have some anxiety just even acknowledging some different labels about myself, whether I make them or others. It's secondary, they're still coming as a result of stepping out of the comfort zone, right? So yeah, this is surely going to be very interesting. So let's just kind of start with, I'll give you my thoughts on labels, and then I want to get kind of your take on them, right? So, so I've got I've kind of got a love-hate challenge with them, because on one hand, I get very angry and frustrated about labels, and people, and both having labels applied to me, or even trying to reference myself as a label to be relatable, because I don't want to be limited and I want to feel like I'm defined. Don't try to put me into a box, right? But on the other hand, right, if I have no labels and I'm totally fluid and nothing, then it makes it very challenging for me to relate to people, find a place of belonging, so to speak, a sense of community, and other things. Not to mention that I've also found tremendous relief, I'm just going to call it, right? Because I'll struggle looking for words at times. And so finding the other labels, and just like their definitions and descriptions and things like that, will allow me to understand and adopt new words and new vernacular that helps me to articulate what I was feeling but couldn't say. And so then it's like uber helpful, right? So anyway, so I've always kind of got this push pull between whether I like them, don't like them, and anyway, so let me just pause there and say, what's been your experience, and how have you kind of gotten at peace with that part?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of folks that'll be able to resonate with that. And I think the big difference of what you're talking about, of the like or the not like, so to speak, you kind of touched on it. It's when a label is applied to you, when somebody else gives you that label and tries to indicate you are this, right? This is you, when you haven't selected, chosen, or told them. And I think a lot of times what happens in those instances is people are often weaponizing those labels as well, right? They're giving you the label of, and I'm sure we'll get down to some of these points, autistic. And they're doing it in order to weaponize it against you. Like, oh, you are different. These are the things. And trying to tell you and describe how you are to you, rather than trying to have that conversation, getting to know you. So I think, I'm not a huge fan of a label that's applied by another individual. It's my personal opinion. I think when we are going to, step into these labels or these personas or these areas of ourselves, and accept them as, part of our identity, I think the most important and critical piece is that we're choosing what they are and we're choosing what they mean, right? Not somebody else.
As soon as you started to see that, I immediately wrote it down, because I think not just labels, but so many things in life, right? When things are applied to you, what's called against your will, or against your desires, right? Versus you choosing them or telling them to be applied to you, right? It's two very different situations. But then when it's also weaponized against you,
Yeah.
then that, that's like a double whammy, right? And you go, wait a second here, wait, hold up. This doesn't seem fair. There's no way of getting out of this. And that, once you fall into that weaponization of labels, so let's talk about that, because I know that I know that I have been subject to the weaponization of labels. So let's talk about some controversial labels, maybe not controversial, but non-traditional labels that might make people awkward or uncomfortable when you're, around cocktail parties, that you would apply to yourself for people to kind of recognize you and relate to you.
Yeah. There's a whole handful of them, and I kind of laugh and chuckle every time, because I swear I add a new one, at least once a month. But I think the very first one that tends to be very controversial is the fact that I'm a witch, and I consider myself an eclectic witch. I'm also a psychic medium. I'm a high priestess. I'm a magician. I'm a Reiki Master. I'm a healer. I consider myself a soul healer. I'm neurodivergent. I have ADHD. I'm a recovering alcoholic, and that's a big controversial thing. Sometimes people will get into a tiff around that one. I don't know that there's a single label that I would apply to myself that couldn't raise the hairs on a few folks, depending upon the audience that I was in. Yeah.
Okay. And so that's so speaking of that, right? So that gets right into my point of, well, or I guess what I feel like is great about it is you take what works for you, right? And you kind of leave the rest.
Yeah, you asked the question of like, how do I get comfortable with it,
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I think the number one thing is I made the choice, right? I was the one that chose to apply these labels to myself, and all of them haven't been, haven't all been comfortable, It just, even when I go back, the two probably most controversial is, labeling myself a witch and labeling myself an alcoholic, and it took me probably 2 years of looking at my relationship with alcohol before I was willing to admit that I was an alcoholic and literally put that label upon myself. And I will continue, there are some folks that step into recovery that, will decide to not embrace that term to describe themselves anymore. But to me, it's a really huge part of my own, sober journey is accepting that label. And then, from the witch perspective, this one's a really interesting one, because myself actually loves the thought of keeping it private, right? There's like a little bit of a secrecy and, kind of like fun with that secrecy and, ha ha ha, like, look at me, I'm a little witch over here. But it was about 1.5 years ago, through like meditation and, talking with my own spirit guides and things of that nature, where they said, I'm sorry, you can no longer hide. You have to make it known. That's part of your journey. That's part of your purpose, is to show people that embracing this path, these beliefs, and this spiritual practice actually has a purpose in life. And it's not something that's trivial or something that should be, judged as being innately evil. And I still, even though it's been 1.5 years since I've stepped into that label in the public space, I still, even just as of 2 days ago, had somebody in my private messages, ridiculing me and chastising me. And then, it flips into this like prove it type of mentality, show me your true powers, you're a joke, and it's just, I think the most important thing with any label that we're going to choose is to know that the moment we do that, that means there are other people that have the ability to judge that label, and you have to be comfortable with allowing the judgment of others to roll off your back. Yeah. And I don't care what label it is. There's always going to be someone that is going to judge it, and you have to be able to let that judgment roll off your back.
Archie, I want to take this time to reiterate, and that's what my hope is with this, and my focus with this podcast is a separation, because from here, we're not going to talk so much about what those labels are, right? Because that's not the purpose. The purpose, what we're wanting to talk about, right, is how to feel comfortable with those labels, how to find out whatever labels are right for you. What are the things what are the challenges that you face in doing so? And also, what are the opportunities as well, though, right? And that's really what this conversation is about, right? It's not about trying to convert people to think one way or another. It's the exact opposite, right? This is about how to help people experience the freedom of thinking for themselves, right? So that being said, I know you started to kind of talk about some challenges, and so let's talk about that, because it's always easier said than done, right? Like, it's always like, I know that it's easy for me to puff out the chest and I don't care what anybody says, and have that combative masculine type of response. But the reality is, behind the scenes, I'm just like, well, that, why are you trying to make me? Why are you trying to make me give me a sad face, man? That's not cool, right?
How do I navigate, what's the literal, I think the first thing is, I've talked about you being the individual that chooses. And I think before you even understand how to navigate the judgment or the hate, let's be real, sometimes that judgment comes with a big old backsplash of hate behind it. You have to make sure that you truly are comfortable with whatever it is that you're labeling yourself. And so to me, one of the biggest practices that I've had, in my own recovery is being really, really comfortable with how my body talks to me, and understanding the somatic responses that my body is having. When we put ourselves into uncomfortable situations, or if I were to try to adopt a label that wasn't really truly aligned, like let's say I wanted to call myself I don't know why this popped into my head, a pickup artist. I'm great at influence and persuasion. Like I'm going to just adopt this. My body, even just thinking of that right now, I get like a little bit nauseous and uncomfortable. Like I'm not a big fan of it. Right. And so learning how to listen to your body to ensure that what you're choosing to label yourself or identify yourself with, I think is a really, really big first step. Because when we do that, the judgment or the hate or whatever else comes our way, right, almost has, like, our body almost has its own kind of like protective barrier to not allowing it to, like, we have this place that we can go that says, no, this is true for me. This is right for me. This feels good for me. And what you're saying or how you're projecting your judgment or your hate doesn't resonate. Right. But if you don't go through this, like, this exercise. And for some people, I told you, accepting the identity of the witch and like using it in a public space was probably a year-long journey, right? Of me talking with, like, back and forth with my guides. Are you really sure? And testing little things and seeing how people responded. And it was always, I felt okay with it, but it was when I put it into these public spaces that this discomfort would happen. And that was the key, was recognizing that it was truly the other individual's discomfort I was feeling, not the discomfort with the decision on myself, right? Other people were uncomfortable with me referring to myself as such. Other people were uncomfortable seeing this in, their public space or on their Facebook feed, because my name literally reflects that now. So to speak. And so you have to be really confident that the labels that you are choosing to accept are labels that you believe ring true, right? And if that's not the case, I'm getting these like pictures in my head of why I think some teenagers and some younger individuals really struggle, is because the years between the ages of, like, I think it's like 12 until about 17, are intended for you to try a lot of hats on, right? To step into a lot of different identities and to, like, test and to see what feels right and what doesn't. And the unfortunate truth, it's also probably the most critical time from our peers, right? And so it's really easy to ignore that true somatic response because someone else is trying to override it for you.
You touched on some quite a few times there, and I want to back up the bus in a second here to earlier in your journey. But while we're talking about this, I want to first do a plug, because for both can I say where you worked at, by the way? Is that cool?
Mhm.
So both, I want to plug for both Quicken Loans, well, now Rocket Mortgage, and both For Direct, because to your point, look, in both cases, I knew you in the corporate world and I saw you come in as your different self. And in some cases that was simply different colored hair. In other cases that was different colored hair and tattoos showing, right? That were definitely non-traditional. So kudos to both of those places for allowing an environment for it to really be cool, for it to be cool for people to genuinely be themselves. And the other thing that I will tell you is watching and observing various marketing data and things like that. When I look around a place and if I don't see if I don't see a pink hair, or I don't see a nonconformist, amongst there, then I know everyone's thinking the same, right? The quote unquote weirdos are is where a lot of the free thinking happens. So you need every company needs a handful of them. So anyway, so I just, it's important to understand as well that even in large companies like that, your identity, what you're talking about, is accepted, right? And so a lot of the uncomfortableness was fears that you were kind of placing on yourself from others, what was out there, more so than necessarily how you would be received. And and I think that's a huge point that I just wanted to give you a chance to comment on too.
No, I mean, our society, and I'll say, here we're in America, right? There might be some cultures that don't agree with this, but our society literally is built for conformity, right? We're little tiny children, and then around the age of 4 or 5, we're put into daycare. We're in a group of students or folks. We're taught in the same fashion. If we don't learn in the same way, we're ostracized from that original group and literally put into another group that's supposed to learn in the same fashion. And so our society is like, hey, here's a box. You should get comfortable in this box. This is what you should be. By the way, after high school, it's college. I mean, there's so many prescribed paths that it's really hard for us to, I'll be 45 this year. And so I just go back and I look at how hard it was to be myself as a teenager, right? Because of this conformity, and in my early 20s, because of this, this literal conformity of here is what you're supposed to be doing, right? And it never felt right to me. And so I was very blessed that I found environments that allowed me to be my strange and unusual self. And frankly, I'm blessed that even though I succumbed to a lot of that conformity, there was still a spark within me that knew that me being different was not only okay, but it was something to be celebrated. And even though I might not have done that in a public setting in the past, right? I never allowed myself to shame myself for it. I may have been shamed by others, right? I may have had others apply that, what are you doing? You're a weirdo, you're crazy, all that kind of stuff. But I never, that's where I said, to me, even that witch title, there was this thrill of keeping it secret, right? Because that has been the most shame that's been applied to me over the course of the many years. But yeah, no, I myself never allowed myself to fall into, patterns of shaming or guilting myself for a label or a choice or a decision or a weirdness that I had. And even to this day, I have plenty of people that sit down in front of me, clients and folks that I work with that, I'm going to say something weird. What I'm about to say is so strange. And I'm like, go for it. Because there really isn't, I have zero judgment on weird and strange. To me, that's what makes life worth living, is the weird and the strange. The conformity stuff is, well, yeah.
Well, it seems like, and there's no doubt, it seems like the tides are changing, and the weird and the strange seems to be rolling in pretty quickly compared to, let's say if you look at it, the pace of the last, few decades. So I want to get kind of literal here for a second on the feels, right? Yeah. Because I know, when I've read things and I listen to people and they'll be like, oh yeah, I felt this, and and I'm like, no, I don't know. If I knew, I wouldn't be listening to you trying to find out what it means to know. I'd be feeling it and I'd be doing it, right? So what, so like help people to understand, how did you know when you talk about it felt right, right? Like what didn't, how do you know, like literally the feeling inside of when something doesn't feel right to you versus when it does feel right, and how you kind of, I guess let's talk a little bit about that, how that served you early on in your life, how you kind of muffled it, right? And then how it's made its way back to being much more of a guidepost for you now, and you trust it.
Yeah, I can't go into any of those conversation without, referencing once again that I'm a recovering alcoholic. And I have been, when I go back and look, I've been drinking since the age of 8, you know. And I'm not talking about every night with a 6-pack as an 8-year-old, right? But I mean, I have a lot of memories of being around that age and literally seeking out half-finished glasses of, rum and cokes my father, wouldn't finish. And, I've looked back a lot at that, and a lot of that was to numb, right? The alcohol was to numb these feelings. Food, I've used food to numb feelings for, many, many, many years. Work to numb feelings, right? To distract the mental thought process and give you something that is productive to be, spending your energy in. And so I've done a lot of these patterns. I say I'm a recovering alcoholic, workaholic, perfectionist, and control freak. A lot of these patterns to numb these feelings and these sensations. And so it wasn't until I got onto the other side of recovery and started to really be willing to feel. And what I mean by feeling, when we can go ahead and, anybody that's listening, you can pull up literally look for like an emotional wheel. Like you can type in Google emotion wheel and it'll show you like a list of literal emotion words to describe emotion. And that's one piece of it. It's one component. But when I'm talking about feeling, I am referencing the feeling in our actual body. Right. And so think about all of the times there's a lot of folks, you might walk into a room, you might walk into a new place, you may meet a new person and you'll be like, they've got a good vibe. They felt okay, or this building feels weird and creepy. Like our body is a barometer. It is a literal, our aura extends about 8 feet out from us. So any place that we walk into, go, experience, even a thought that we may have can give us a literal bodily sensation, right? The challenge is so many of us have done exactly what I was doing through most of their life. They found some other way to numb those sensations through alcohol, drugs, food, sex, chaos, drama. Drama is a really huge one. I've had a couple conversations with folks lately where people will literally be in drama cycles to avoid and ignore what they actually truly are feeling and witnessing. And so our body will be what resonates, and this can feel like you could feel sick, like literal physically sick, nauseous, uncomfortable, heaviness, tightness in chest, poor digestion, slow digestion, or you could literally feel an energetic, shift and change. I feel more energy. I've been able to sleep better, anything of that nature. And so when I talk about feeling, it's literally looking inwards to the body itself and asking the body, how is it feeling? And I don't mean that emotion word. I mean the literal physical sensation in the body, right? That to me is one of the biggest indications. And that somatic response of a tightness in the chest, right? Or like that sickness that you'll kind of feel like your whole stomach kind of like clenches in. Or even this feeling, how it shows up for me sometimes with stuff is like, I will literally feel like something is hard to do. Right? Like if I'm supposed to go out this afternoon and I'm supposed to meet someone for coffee or something of that nature. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't even get up. Oh, the day. Oh, like that even alone is the body's way of showing that there's something not aligned with the direction that you're going. Yeah. The body is the number one truth teller.
It's funny, as you're sitting there talking about those things, I was like, all right, check. Yeah, check. Been there, that one too. Yep, check. And to your point, right? Like, I didn't know at that time, I didn't know about myself as sensitivity or picking up on, the energies of others and things of that nature. Right? And so all of those other ways of dealing with it, right? And then, it's not like we all sit around talking, which is again part of the reason this podcast, because we don't all sit around talking about how we're actually feeling and wondering, does everybody feel this way? Does everybody go through this stuff? What's normal, right? Like we all kind of have our thing with, or at least, I feel like I had to realize that I actually don't know how everybody else feels. I don't know if everybody else goes through this, right? And so that's part of, and what I've learned is through these more open and vulnerable conversations that, that there's a lot more people that go through it, right? And now it may not be the exact same situation, but the emotion behind the stuff, right, of what is experienced, is definitely there. And you're right. And it took me a long time. I looked back and I had to learn how to understand the difference between when is my stomach hurting because I just ate some bad food, and when is my stomach hurting because it's telling me that I'm not being true to myself right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is this nauseousness again because why am I feeling nauseous? And most of the times it was because I had to learn that it's because I'm holding something in I should be saying, right? I'm not being true to myself. I'm not being genuine. And, and these are all common things. I just take some Tums and an event. And of course, I took plenty of pills to make the feels go away because I didn't know what they were, right? So you can override the body talking to you, right? There's ways, you know what I mean? So turning it off, it's not, my challenge is I just didn't really come with a dimmer switch, right? For me, it was either on or off as far as I, kind of knew. And so when you're talking about then what feels right, I guess I would kind of add to that to just say, because this is right where is then also what happens after that, right? Because it's one thing to say, oh, you know what, I read this, and that seems like me. So I'm going to identify with this. And I'm going to kind of start to adopt that label, and I'm going to kind of try on those clothes and, and see how it feels. And then there's the watching to see how everything else happens around you. Now, I don't want to get caught up in trying to sit in trying to say, now watch people look for all kinds of reasons and everything that happens to you. And there's information that's, has significant life meaning. No, stuff that happens to sometimes just information, not everything's significant meaning behind the stuff that happens to us, right? And so, but how would you tell people then to look at what type of cues to look for to say, the universe is supporting me based on these clothes that I'm starting to wear. So that's kind of a sign that I'm in line, right? Some people may say, look for synchronicities, right? What would you kind of say?
Yeah. The synchronicities can be really good. You'll also watch, like, the moment you start to adopt, and you step into a label that feels good, you'll often start to watch the universe kind of shift and align towards that. So you might start to see more folks that are like, oh yeah, actually, I'm neurodivergent too. Oh, actually, I'm a witch. Oh, so you're going to start to see some of that validation. But on the flip side, you're going to start to see some folks challenging it as well. And that's kind of the universe's way of saying, like, hey, man, you took on an identity. Like, are you sure? Like, are you sure? And it's not, it won't happen forever. Like I said, the gentleman that challenged me just here a couple of days ago, I probably haven't had someone do that kind of work with me. I don't know, probably about a year, but it just so happens that I'm about to venture out and do some changes within my own business. And so, like, of course, someone's going to pop up and challenge my own, confidence in myself, like the universe is able to deliver both really beautiful lessons, like these people aligning towards you again, you finding new paths, new opportunities, new stores. I mean, I can't tell you, I don't know if I've ever shared this story with you, but I remember in my 20s, I had started to research and go down the path of trying to research more magical practices aligned to, like, the Golden Dawn and Aleister Crowley and some of these really old magicians. And I could never find anything. I couldn't find the right books. I'd go into, like, bookstores. They wouldn't have anything present there. And I just couldn't. And so I like dismissed it and left it. And it's only been now on the other side of recovery, as I stepped back into my spirituality, that they just keep flooding to me, right? I'll have a book. Oh, have you ever read this before? Would you like to read it? And I'm like, oh my God, this is a book that I was literally looking for 15, 20 years ago, right? And so you'll watch these synchronicities, you'll watch these things, kind of pop up. People come in, situations come in. You may even see some things around, like songs, movies, music, all to validate that you've chosen maybe the right path, the right label. But the moment you also have that questioning and challenging happening, it's validation as well, right? When you start to watch someone, and frankly, like if you take any more controversial type of labels, if the folks that are listening decide to go down the path and take something that's pretty controversial, what you're going to find is those folks that are challenging you are actually meant to exit your life, right? That's like the universe's way of starting to show you that these are not the people aligned with that path, with that next step, that next phase. So yeah, the feelings are one thing. I think folks are going to get synchronicities in another way. And you're just going to start to see more validation on both sides as well, right? Where more things are aligning to take you down that path and more things are challenging you. Because the reality is, as much as we may want a high vibration life, but we might want a life filled with peace and love and happiness and joy, there are other people out there very often around us that are struggling with that and would much prefer to have you down on their level. Misery loves company is the statement.
Let's talk about a different level here. So it's always easy to have these. I shouldn't say it's easier to have these conversations that are in hindsight, right? When you have the ability to experience and everything to prove stuff out. So let's take this back to before, like earlier on in your life, right? Like you talked about, feeling and what feels right, and taking the time to be present and listen. And then you also use a term meditate. And I want to talk about that for a quick second because while yes, there's very specific disciplines of meditation or teachings within it, and I think that sometimes that's what people think that's what you has to, in order to be meditative or to be thoughtful or to be present, right? It has to be something very structured like that, right? But sometimes, but for the purpose of this conversation, and when we're thinking about meditation and being able to be present and listen to yourself, like what's a more simplified, distilled down version for somebody who doesn't want to think about themselves in a meditation room meditating?
I mean, the way I've always described meditation is awareness of thought, right? That's all that it is, and another way to look at it is going to be mindfulness, like being very mindful of where your thoughts are and where they're not. And so for some people, if we were to go down and really talk about folks that are on this like enlightened path, you might get into these conversations around like meditation is clearing of thoughts and you're just able to sit in peace and be with no thought for an hour, right? And yeah, that's lovely and really wonderful, and that would be an amazing place to get to, but it's not realistic for most people. Right. And there's a lot of people that I've talked to that they stop going down the path of trying to meditate because they can't get this silence of mind. Right. They just can't get to it. And so they think that they're not good at meditating. And so I always say all meditation is just the awareness of thought, recognizing, oh, that's interesting. I'm wondering why this thought's coming up, but not right now. We'll go ahead and revisit that later. Right. And allowing those thoughts to just come and go. Maybe there's one that you sit with a little bit longer. Maybe there's one, for example, I said, through meditating and talking with my guides, when I was told that I actually needed to embrace the title of the witch, like that came through. I literally, the meditation is I was dancing. I had music on and I was just in my living room and I was just dancing and I was just allowing my mind to just enjoy the music. And it was, it wasn't even in a lyric at that particular point. It was this kind of download of knowing that just came through. And I said, that's interesting. I said, what do you mean? And that's when my guides responded with you have to embrace this title. It's part of your path. It's part of what you're meant to do in this next phase of your life. And so, yeah, it's when we're conscious of our mind and more aware of it, you may find that through that meditative state or this awareness that you get information beyond just your thoughts.
Right. So so receiving information, and there's a time, right? So I think you would also have experienced that we may have received the same information many times but there just comes at one time when it's the intersection of the information coming through and our ability to hear it the way that it needs to be heard, right? And so I know for me, I had a point in my life where I finally said, all right, this is crap. There's no way that the human body is just designed to all of a sudden just be on pills and feel horrible, right? Like there's just no way that this is as good as it gets and that this is what we're meant to be. And on the other hand, right, don't get me wrong, taking a pill, to make yourself feel better is a nice thing. And then the other side of the coin was like oh, well, it's just because you don't have a healthy body, and so other things are going wrong with you, for example, right? Like I've gone down a path where glasses, okay, so Eastern medicine says that me needing glasses is due to, a challenge. I can't remember, so please, like the liver and other, just the body's ability to work together as it should properly. So therefore the body in itself isn't healthy enough. And so therefore the eyes are just a symptom of that, right? Of it's just telling that to me. So I'm like, all right, cool. If that's going to be the case, I'm tired of feeling like I'm the one that's broken. I'm going to get healthy as can be and see if I get my eyesight any better, right? And so, yeah, I'm saying this on camera and, but like that's, and then working with my friends that are Eastern practitioners to say, hey, look, walk me through this, guys, right? Because you guys believe that we can do these things. I want to believe that I can make myself feel better, but yet I don't look around and see all of these examples of all of this stuff happening necessarily. And again, that could be the difference between Western culture and Eastern otherwise. But either way, the point is I don't see it. And so I want to see more of it. I want to believe. I'm willing to put in the effort. So somebody help me do it. And so that's when I got to that point and I started to then understand myself in a very different way, right? I started to learn and listen to my body and started to be open to it. And it wasn't even trying to get to it from that direction. So I got sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. What was your, I guess, transition point, or what maybe your first transition point, since there's been many, where you were younger, you didn't know what you were feeling, you just knew that you were tired of kind of feeling a different way, and you started recognizing that your body was guiding you to feel other ways, and and that got your attention.
No, yeah, no, it did. And so, the interesting thing is I think so. And we go back to that whole statement that I said, this conformity, this train, this like what we just get on and we just start going and going and going and never take a pause or a stop. And, I was talking with a friend earlier today and we were talking about like retreats and things of that nature. And I think it's really important that we always have moments within our lives that we stop what we typically are doing. Like when we get off of that train and just stop and look around and take notice. And so for me, the time that became so intensely transformative for me, in a number of different ways, right? Our past life together, we both worked for Quicken Loans, now Rocket Mortgage. And, I had to, towards the latter part of my time there in that career, I had to take a leave of absence. My father was really sick. And so I took this leave of absence. And so for 2.5 months, I was around the medical field, tending to my father, my mother, helping to care for, which gives you a lot of time to start thinking about, and forces you, let's be real, when you're facing mortality in the face, right, by a loved one about to cross over, you're being told, you start to like look at life differently. You start to question it. You start to challenge it. You start to wonder. And, I just, at that particular point, I had a marriage that was, had dissolved. One of the things in that marriage that my ex-husband had told me was that I was too involved with my work and didn't have enough time for him in the relationship. And so I'm also watching my father like on his deathbed and the way that he was kind of, I was mirroring this workaholism of his, right? And that leave of absence and going back into the office when it ended and feeling how intense the energetic was in my body at that point. Like it was a real eye opener of this is not the right place for me. This isn't where I'm supposed to be. My whole nervous system went on like this heightened, for lack of a better way to describe it, defense. Right? Like it felt like the moment I stepped back into this corporate environment at that point that every bit of me wanted to be on a defense, that it needed to like fight, that it needed to like pull up armor. And, and I was like, God, is this the way I want to wake up and show up in life every day? Is this okay? And the answer was no, it's not. And the moment that happened, all of these blinders started to come down, and I started to see, some of the toxic projections that I was putting onto the environment around me. And it was just, at that point, it wasn't just them, like it wasn't just the environment and the folks that I worked with, but it was who I was when I stepped into that environment. And that was the workaholic, the perfectionist, the control freak, and the alcoholic. Right. And it was at that particular time, it would have been in 2017, the end of 2017, that I started to like take a step back and really question for the first time whether or not that train was what I really wanted to be on.
Wow. Well, that's very vulnerable. And I think a lot of people can relate to those feelings when we were able to take the time to stop and be present and listen. And sometimes that can be just doing it when you're brushing your teeth, getting ready, right? Like sometimes, let's be real. Life happens. So we don't all have time to just go sit in a room for a while, right? You gotta, find those little moments to just be very present for 2 minutes at a time, right? And things like so. Unfortunately, we're starting to, having to wind it down, and I hate to do that at the end of such a beautiful story. So I do want to give you the opportunity. I'm going to bring up some points. I want to give the listeners an opportunity to understand you and how to reach out to you as well if this stuff relates. So is there any, before we get into you and what you do, are there any last minute words of wisdom or things that didn't come up that you would want to share with the listeners?
I actually think it's like a really beautiful point to kind of like wrap, because the sentiment there, we started this talking about labels, right? We started talking about labels, some of the importance of labels, some of the challenges of it. And at the end of the day, the biggest thing that I recognized and realized is I had to give enough time to myself to be able to step off of that train, as I said, just for a moment, to be able to look around and recognize that these labels other people had put on me, right? The like party girl that loved to drink, that was social, like all of these other labels weren't the labels that I actually wanted. They weren't the labels that made me feel good. They weren't the labels that like nourished my soul and made me feel as though they were relevant to a purpose that I had here in life. And so, that's to me is probably the biggest thing to state, for anybody that is listening and you're hearing any of this for the first time, and maybe you had that somatic, response. Maybe you had this feeling of like, oh my God, I totally get that. Like, just give yourself a second to pause, and it doesn't have to be 2.5 months, right? It might be 2 minutes while you're brushing your teeth, as Graham said, but just give yourself that moment to pause and truly ask yourself, are you happy with the way life is? Are you happy with it? Are you fulfilled?
Simple question, not necessarily easy to answer.
Mm-mm.
That one takes a different type of look in the mirror.
Yeah.
And so, and I would say when you're wanting to learn from somebody, right? You want to learn with somebody who's looked in the mirror. You want to have somebody who's had experiential knowledge. So based on what you just said, and I want to recap what you talked about here and in giving you credit for your experiential knowledge and for the listeners to relate to as well, which is we said, look, if you're going to adopt these things, here's the things to look out for and to be prepared. To be prepared is number one, it should feel real to you, right? It should feel like you're willing to, you're comfortable kind of getting made fun of, being called that, right? For lack of a better way of thinking about it, but there's just that level of certainty, right? And expect to be challenged for that matter, right? If something is important and it's ingrained enough to you, look, we're here to learn, right? And so the universe is going to provide you those opportunities to learn and ingrain yourself, right? And so the universe kind of says, hey, if you're not willing to believe in yourself, how can you ask me to believe in you, right? So show me this is who you are, and I'm going to support you. And I think that that's an important part too, is to view those things, not to view headwinds as negativity, not to view challenges as negativity, right? To understand them as being as actually positive KPIs that let you know you're on the right track.
They're reinforcements.
And that's right, reinforcements. And then the last thing is just also understand that sometimes the indicators that you're on the right track is that your life around you is kind of changing. Those that are around you that may be in it, may not be in it, right? People that were around different perspectives will find their way to not be around anymore. And so if judging, people leaving or otherwise as the only thing, then that's a challenge. So what I would say is if people are leaving your life and everything else in your life is going to shit as well, pardon my language, then yeah, okay, there's probably something else going on there, all right, that requires some deeper reflection. However, if people have left your life, but yet you wake up feeling better every morning, you feel more clarity, you feel more comfortable in your own skin, you feel good walking out the door, okay, then that's indicators that you should feel good about the path that you're on, etc. Right. So if this type of experiential knowledge and understanding has been helpful at all, Sunshine, what is exactly kind of that you do, and how might what you do be able to help our listeners that I've enjoyed our conversation today?
Yeah. There's a lot of business folks that would say I should have a very clear and succinct pitch line right there to tell you. And some of that in my own journey right now is being defined. I will tell you the people that I am looking to help the most are individuals that truly know and understand that they identify as a witch and that they are looking to change their life. They want to recover from this life. They want to get off that train and they want to step into something that they have more empowerment in, more hope in, more optimism. And I say recovery. I'm a recovering alcoholic, workaholic, perfectionist, and control freak. But I say that, anybody that is suffering from kind of the addiction to lower vibration. So this can be drugs, sex, alcohol, violence, shopping, food, sugar, drama, and chaos. Those are real two big ones that I watch people cycle in and out of. And so if you are tired of living a life that just does not feel aligned to where you're meant to go next, that's who I want to reach out. We'll help you recover from the life that you once lived and help you walk into the life that you're meant to live.
And how do you want them to reach out to you?
Yeah, you can find me. My favorite way is sunshine@sunshinereadings.com. That's my email address. I sit on the other side of it. It's my favorite way for folks to find me. You can also look on Facebook, Instagram for Sunshine Readings. And visit the website too, sunshinereadings.com. Yeah.
All right. Well, I can't thank you enough for being open, being vulnerable, right? Sharing the ugly. I hope that people were able to, bring a smile, a laugh, relatability, anything, as well. I know I always get stuff out of our conversations. And so I know we'll be on here again. And so I just want to, thank you again for showing up. And then secondly, I know you're going to as well as starting your next chapter of life. So, sending you much, much strength and support, my friend, for the universe to support you and get your footing as well.
I adore being here. Thank you for having me, Graham.
All righty. Take care, everybody.